My name's Rob Gronbeck. I'm the founder and owner of the Brain Room. And my firm belief is that until you really start training the brain, you're never really going to get the most out of your performance. I've been training athletes since 2014 as the first person in Australia to do so with NeuroTracker. And thousands of sessions later, I've really experienced a lot of joy and seen a lot of great improvements from athletes, students, people with brain injuries, and myself. So it's been a pleasure to be part of the NeuroTracker journey. I saw that there was a massive gap in Cairns in terms of sports performance and psychology training. And yet, as I went back and started to do that from my initial training in sports psychology with a wonderful company called SportsMind, I found that there was a lack of tangible evidence. It's very hard to measure mental skills. Like, how can I measure if someone's visualizing better? Or how can we tell if someone's getting better in their relaxation? It's very tough to very difficult to measure that. It's all subjective. And so I went looking for a way to measure objective aspects of sports psychology. And I did a couple of webinars for my local area, and one of them was on neuroscience. And while I didn't ever pull the trigger on that website, on that webinar, I did end up finding the NeuroTracker website, and that showed me there was an objective, subjective, measurable metric, which actually delineated the top professional athletes from the amateur or semi-professional athletes to normal people, to older folks, people with brain injuries. So that was like, oh, the light bulb came on, and I thought, well, okay, there's something here. And once I did use my research skills that we learn and critical thinking in psychology, I realized that this program had an extremely strong pedigree, Jocelyn Faubert, University of Montreal, and I put enough together to realize, okay, this is something that can be powerful and effective. 2014, February 4, I believe, might have been 10:53 a.m. We can check it on the logs. I did my first NeuroTracker session in my home, and I operate out of my home to start with. One of my first client was an exercise physiologist who saw the power and benefit of the NeuroTracker and invited me to work out of his exercise physiology lab, where I worked and had my first initial successes and clients with sports, students, and people with severe traumatic brain injury and also Parkinson's. And that's where I first started. And it was a wonderful experience. The reason I created the Brain Room was because all habits generally need a time and a place to do things, a dedicated space. And we have a yoga room, we have weight room, we have cardio room, we have a massage room, we have the Pilates room, we have the spinning bike room in all gyms. But where is the brain room? You know, where can you train your brain and actually take it seriously? So are you putting time and money into developing your brain? And I believe that NeuroTracker is really like the squat rack or the bench press or the treadmill for the brain. Because what I've seen over the years is when you push the brain to threshold, it improves, it adapts, its performance increases, and that translates to everyday life and sports and any other context you can really care to mention. But what I've also seen is it can increase in stamina as well. Like at first, there'll be a drop off after the third set, just like there's a drop off after your third mile of running or your third set of bench press. But after a while, you're able to maintain that third set. And then you can add another set. And what I see is that I made up cognitive conditioning, and I'm sure it's been used before. I've seen it around the place. But for me, cognitive conditioning is what we do at the Brain Room, just like you do strength and conditioning in the weight room. And the reason that's important is because we can use a sports science methodology of volume, repetitions, intensity, processing speed, such as your score over time. And we can actually start to build a training methodology. And I've written about this in my NeuroTracker blog, where we can actually talk about the brain as a physical biological entity which can become more energy efficient. And so there's people will talk about, oh, the brain uses 25 or 30% of your energy per day. And I'm like, but what happens if NeuroTracker training actually made it so that instead of 25%, it used 23%, because it actually became more energy efficient and streamlined. And I see what happens when people have more stamina. They can run faster, their brain can run faster, it can run for longer, because they're conditioning their neurons to work more efficiently, just like the body does. So the brain room for me is a place where we can train cognitive conditioning. And it's not the only brain network. There are other brain networks and regions which we can train up that NeuroTracker doesn't necessarily touch on, but as a cornerstone of the brain room and cognitive conditioning, NeuroTracker for me is right up there, or is the tool of choice, I believe. Well, I was introduced to flow by my best friend. He told me he's a high-level professional 100-meter sprinter. I went to high school together, and he was like, "You've got to read this book. You've got to read this book." And the book was called Stealing Fire, and it's an epic book. It's well worth a read. But the prequel by one of the authors, Stephen Kotler, was called The Rise of Superman, and it's talking about how the evolution of extreme athletes and extreme sports radically just kept on growing and growing and growing. And it looked like there were these key triggers: rich environments, novelty, risk, deep embodiment, focus, all linked to this state called flow, named and labeled by a researcher, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. And the idea came to me as I was doing NeuroTracker one day, and I'd read Rise of Superman, and I was just looking through what we're doing, and I'm like, this system actually triggers the majority of the flow triggers. And when I saw that, I'm like, okay, and this is 2 or 3 years into training NeuroTracker, I realized that one of the reasons we've been having such a powerful impact with athletes, and anyone for that matter, was because we were putting people into high attentional, high demand flow states. And once you get in that flow state to begin with, you go into it and then you fall out of it. And you go into it and you fall out of it. But eventually, after a while, that state, that brain state of being focused and have your peripheral vision aware and possibly doing some kind of other physical task, that ends up becoming who you are. So you become more flow prone. And with that, your ability to make decisions quickly, your ability to stay focused and not get distracted, your ability to manage your attention. So for me, I saw that and I thought, wow, that's probably a really good explanation, as well as pushing to threshold and adding complexity and keeping the challenge skills ratio. And I think that's the big thing with NeuroTracker. It can get too frustrating if it's too fast, can get super boring if it's too slow. But if it's in the right level, and that's what the NeuroTracker staircase does, it allows you to monitor and just keep you in that zone of just hard enough, or just a little bit too hard, or not quite hard enough, and that keeps you engaged. And that is really what flow is all about, is having the right amount of challenge for the resource or the skills or the capacity that you have. So I think that really, for me, that's where the link between NeuroTracker is and flow is in that challenge skills ratio, as much as the attention, the embodiment that you can create by bouncing on a Swiss ball or juggling or bouncing a basketball or whatever while you're doing NeuroTracker, or doing it with a mate, or being creative and coming up with something that is a new way to do NeuroTracker. And creativity is a massive flow generator. I think you can put them all together, and of course I wrote about it in the flow article, so all the information is there. The flow triggers are generally broken down into psychological, environmental, and social, and there's also like another category of just creative. And psychological triggers, there's 4 of them. One is intense focus, one of them is a clear goal, another one is immediate feedback, and the other psychological trigger is the challenge skills ratio. And with NeuroTracker, just running through it, intense concentration. Well, you've got to concentrate intensely, right? Because if you don't, if you think about something, or if you look away, or if you get distracted, you fail. So it demands intense concentration. Clear goals. Follow these balls for this amount of time and tell me what the answer is. I mean, it's pretty clear, right? Immediate feedback after every round, every rep and every set, you get feedback straight away to let you know whether you're on or whether you're off. And that's so crucial. And of course, the challenge skills ratio is, it's got to be just hard enough where it challenges you, but not too, so it makes you frustrated, and and not too easy where it's boring. And that's where generally NeuroTracker, you end up getting about anywhere from 75 to 85% right. In all of my staircase sessions, that's generally the level, because it always finds that level for you on the day. The environmental triggers are things like novelty and a rich environment where there's unpredictability. And with NeuroTracker, every session is unpredictable. You never know which way those balls are going to go. You can't learn it. You can learn what to do, but you can't ever memorize it. So it's always different. A risk is another one. Now, for me, there's a couple of different kinds of risk, but just risk being wrong. Risk challenging yourself, stepping up every single time, and risk being wrong. That's something that, feedback is sometimes tough to take. And a deep embodiment. And that's where the dual task NeuroTracker really shines, because I had a sports scientist and a medicine at a professional Australian rules football club at the highest level tell me that NeuroTracker, they didn't believe in it because it was static visual training. And that was their buff and their rebuttal to me, and it never went any further. But they were missing the massive benefit of NeuroTracker is that you can stand and watch the NeuroTracker while someone handballs a ball to you and you've got to catch it and hand pass it back, or they kick a ball to you and you've got to catch it and then kick it back to somebody, all peripherally. So the ability to combine that physical task with the physical triggers and the environmental triggers, really be embodied in your body and integrate vision and motor control and perception control. That's the real beauty of it. And in terms of the social triggers, if you get a mate or a buddy in, or a competitive partner, and you share and you compete, or you create together, then you can share something with someone. And we are humans, and we bond and we compete, and we want to be the alpha, and we want to be the dominant player. So social aspects, I won't go into all those triggers, but that's how I see flow as being the triggers related to NeuroTracker. My initial foray and conversations with the Flow Genome, I got on a call with their co-founder and director, Jamie Wheel, and I was actually showing how using strobe glasses, these glasses that you wear and they flicker, makes it very hard to see, is the occlusion training device, while doing NeuroTracker, actually caused me, once I took the strobe glasses off, that the balls looked like basketballs and everything seemed to be slow. And part of the flow and downhill skiing, Jamie's all really into that. It's all about kind of that time distortion aspect. So that was my share with him. And I got invited to take part in their inaugural coaches certification. I demonstrated NeuroTracker to the group during lunchtimes. Did the same thing last year as well, just to show people how we can start to train attention, focus, learn, and really give an excellent embodiment of how to train flow and use those triggers in various ways, the psychological triggers, the environmental triggers, and the creative and the social triggers. And I've been a mentor for their programs and run monthly sessions with other coaches for the community. So that's really my part in the Flow Genome project, and they're really rad group, and I'm really grateful to be part of a real high performance network. It's been great. So my experience with dual tasks, at first I followed the basic NeuroTracker learning system, which is start sitting down, then stand up, and then add a balance task, and then progress from there. And after a while, balancing on balance cushions, or balancing on one leg, or doing squats up and down, or doing the agility task, which is like a dodge, a matador type approach where the beam comes at you and you've got to dodge out the way, and the Microsoft Connect can tell you whether or not you got out of the way. After a while, things get a bit stale. What can I do? I'd done well over 1,000 or so sessions by that point. I'd improved my speed, my visual tracking speed, or my VTS max, as I like to call it, by 200 or 300% by then. But yeah, there was no novelty. The flow was kind of failing because it was the same thing. I was on that plateau, that long, steady plateau. And the big thing for me when I I found my flow again, and I videotaped this on NeuroTracker on YouTube on flow. I'm hacking flow with NeuroTracker. Was I balanced on a Swiss ball, a blow up ball, and I wasn't allowed to touch the floor, and I had to balance either on my knees or on my knees and with my hands on the ball, or with my hands not off the ball. And I had so much fun. I scored pretty high. And there's something about being in a new environment, having new stimulus, it switches the brain on. And it was strange that I scored extremely high. I also tried it while sitting on my bottom, and my feet were in front of me and my arms were out. And this was really challenging. But I scored really high when I did that too. And my tongue was out and I was laughing and I was really engaged. I was having a great time because I found something that was extremely challenging and also fun. So for me, the dual tasks have been tremendous. One of my early clients who went on to win the Australian Motocross Championships twice in a row, I had him pedaling on a stationary bike as hard as he could, and his heart rate was at about 160 or 170, so very hard, very fit guy, and also playing GoPro sounds of a monster motocross, so the sounds of the engine revving, and while he's going at full capacity, and he was able to do that for 5 sessions straight. So he did 100 reps, about 25-30 minutes worth of session, and maintained his visual tracking speed the whole way through. And he was at probably about 2.5, which is just a metric of score, as you guys know, but he started at about 0.4, which was just remarkable. Like, how can this guy be at the top of his game getting a 0.4 when most athletes will get a 1.3 or whatnot? So he was not only traveling maybe 400 or 500 times faster, but now he was doing it while his heart rate was at full capacity. And normally, as you know, when our heart rate's in full capacity, sometimes our peripheral vision shrinks and we lose our focus. What we were training with him was wide peripheral vision while your heart rate's going, and also the sounds of the sporting sounds that he would hear. I've done that with young soccer players as well, and playing the crowds from EPL games or whatnot. So I love and show everybody the NeuroTracker progression video, because that really paints the picture. I'd love to create my own. I've always thought about that, but that progression video, from sitting to standing to balancing to optic flow to stick handling or sliding or agility or bouncing a basketball, or one day I'll get a slack line and I'll balance on a slack line while I do the NeuroTracker. One day I will get a proper glass plated infrared sauna and do it inside a sauna, because I think there's some big capacity for heat and creating brain-derived neurotropic factor as the fertilizer of the brain to enhance learning. I've got an ice bath in my brain room. I'm looking forward to doing some NeuroTracker in the ice bath. I mean, anything that you can, and we've seen what Aaron Cook is doing. He's doing snatches and presses with 60 to 80 kilograms. Like, what you can do with NeuroTracker, as long as you can maintain your focus going forward, I see that as the cream of the crop. And for myself, it's only improved my beach volleyball. It's only improved my hand-eye coordination. I've just got to get those physical and sporting skills to match my brain and NeuroTracker skills. So yeah, lots more could go on about dual task, which had some awesome experiences with it.